This parsha on Balak and Balaam is very critical. Okay? And as we get into it, we're going to start with Balak and interject a little bit of Balaam. Then we'll go to Balaam to get some clarity about who and maybe and what he was. But this has to do primarily with Israel entering the land. See, the world doesn't mind you being under their authority and not in the land separate from them. They were extremely afraid of Israel. Balak could not conquer Israel because Sihon and Og were much stronger opponents and they fell. So he had to come up with a plan. He was considered a sorcerer and a king. So he had to come up with a different plan because he couldn't do it by himself. Now, when we look, Balak was trying to come up with a different destructive approach. And it's a story of a Moabite king who is terrified by the Jewish people's presence on the border of his country. Now, since the Jews were already victorious, okay, Balak knows that he would be unable to defeat them militarily. Instead, he tries a different approach. He hires a Gentile prophet, Balaam, who he instructs to curse the Israel and thereby destroy them in Numbers 22, 5, and 6. Now, Balak's behavior has contemporary overtones for today. We'll see many examples of those who try to destroy Israel politically when they recognize they will not be able to do it by force. Okay? So, now, in the Jewish writings, there is the statement that they believed that Balak was a great sorcerer. So why didn't he need to hire Balaam to destroy the Jewish people? Why couldn't Balak simply have done it himself? Well, problem is that all the sorcerers of Egypt went down by the mighty hand of God. So he had to come to realize that he had no way of conquering them spiritually. So he had to come up with a different plan. Okay? To conquer God's people, basically, is to cut them off from their God. And that was the beginning of the plan. Now, the idea to explain the mechanics of blessings and cursings. What does a blessing do? A blessing brings a connection between and an attachment between you and God. Whereas a curse creates a separation and distance from God. Balaam's power to curse, therefore, indicated his goal: to separate the Jewish people from their closeness to God. Is that what happens today? In unity, we're strong. In division, we're separated. So now we can understand why Balak needed Balaam's help in destroying the Jews. As long as the Jewish people were attached to the divine, they were immune from the forces of darkness. Even the most powerful sorcerer and magic in the world could have no effect on them. Egypt is the example. You don't think they knew what happened to Egypt? They did. Okay? And then you got this light by night, pillar of fire, and a cloud by day, 2 million people plus wandering around your borders. It would make them extremely nervous. So, Balak therefore wanted Balaam to curse the Jews in order to break their strong connection to God. Now, if this connection could be broken, then Balak's evil sorceries would be able to penetrate, and Israel would or could be destroyed. Now, how would Balaam, and let's briefly look at him, how can Balaam, Gentile prophet, apparently God spoke to him. Okay? We have numerous occasions. Besides that, okay, who was he? Is there any connection to anybody that we can think of? Him being a Gentile prophet had the ability to curse and to bless. Also, God spoke to him. That means that he had some relationship with God. We'll take a stronger look at that in a minute, but let's talk about how many people feel that a separation between you and God, and maybe by not blessings but by a curse. Now, Balaam is unable to curse the Jews despite his repeated efforts. Every time Balaam tries to curse, God forces him to utter words of blessing. Now, from the blessings, and we will call Balaam a wicked man, you learn what was in his heart. Apparently, Balaam's true intentions were not completely disguised by the blessings that he was forced to speak. So, what was his real intentions? The verse tells us, God, your God. Didn't sound like his God, did it? Okay? Transform the curse into a blessing because God, your God, loves you. Deuteronomy 23:6. Blessings are the opposite of a curse. Therefore, we should be able to deduce Balaam's true intentions by simply reading the opposite of what he said. Example, Balaam says he did not see any sin in Yaakov or any crookedness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the king's friendship is within him. That is found in Numbers 23:21. Now, Balaam's blessings implied a very close relationship to the divine, a connection of warmth and attachment. Here we can deduce that Balaam would have to prefer to curse us with utter separation and detachment from God. That is the purpose. Not only then, it is the purpose of the world today. Do whatever it can to separate you, detach you from God. Okay? In other words, he was trying to get the Jewish people to curse themselves. So, we see a proof of this idea in the famous verse, love your fellow as yourself, I am God. Leviticus 19:18. So, why does God need to identify himself at the end of this verse? Because God is the source of all the commandments. Okay? Only after we develop an ability to love other people. This seems to be one of the biggest problems that people have because they haven't learned to love themselves. If you can love yourself, you can love your neighbor. We need to love other people as ourselves. We can know how to experience closeness to the divine. If you love your neighbor, you're going to draw close to God. It's God's principle. Now, we see a hint to this idea in the Hebrew word echad. One. Not the letter one, but a composite unity. Okay? Now, which symbolizes unity, oneness, and attachment. The numerical value of the word echad is 13. And the value of a hav is the word love, hava. Okay? It is also 13. If we add echad to a hava, the result is 26. This is the same numerical value as the 4 letters of the name of Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh. Okay? Now we can learn from here that when one person attaches to another person with closeness and love, it ultimately leads to the same relationship with God. Very powerful. That's why the first example is in the family, the husband, the wife. The practical way of creating closeness and love in our lives is to bless each other. Okay? By giving blessings, we can create an environment of love and acceptance and connection. This will bring us closer together, and it will lead to the possibility of achieving closeness with God. But if we curse, each other, and that seems to be very prominent in the churches today, we create division, disunity among ourselves, which cuts us off from God, leaving us unprotected from the negativity of the world forces. Now the scenario here is that Balak, wanted to bring a curse upon the children of Israel so that his darkness and negative powers could come from the world upon the children of Israel. Now I want to exhort you, never forget that in the times of Balak and Balaam, we learn, that we need to protect ourselves from the negative energies in the world. And you do that by attaching closer to God. If you draw close to God, God says, I'll draw close to you. Okay? If you walk contrary to God, God will walk contrary to you. So we can achieve closeness, and we do this by the creative power of the force of unity, protecting us from calamity. So, Balak, he understood that he would not be able to destroy Israel through military force. The story goes like this. He therefore decided to investigate the source of Israel's strength. Knowing that Moses had spent many years in Midian, they believed that he went to Midian and inquired of the elders there, who responded that Moses' strength lay in the power of speech. This gave Balak an idea. He hired a Gentile prophet named Balaam in order to curse the Jewish people. Speech. So Balak reasoned that if the Jewish people could be protected by speech, the power of speech could also bring about their downfall. Well, it wasn't just speech that protected them. It was the presence of the Almighty God. Greater is He that's within you than he that's in the world. So God desires to make this, the real reason is that God desires to make this world into a home befitting the divine presence. The next example of that will be the millennial kingdom. And the example after that will be the new heavens, new earth, and the new Jerusalem. Now the transformation is achieved by mankind overcoming their passions, thereby sanctifying all the physical things of the earth and turning it into a spiritual realm. Now, eventually Israel will be a picture of this before the millennial kingdom. the body of Messiah should already be a picture of this. But they are struggling. Okay? Now, is there a place which has the potential, and we know that that is Israel. Though the unique commandments that are tied to the land, we can transform materialism into spirituality. In the time of Moses, had Israel succeeded to enter the land and living there according to the Torah, they would have been able to elevate and purify not just Israel, but the entire world. What was the commission of Yeshua to the body of Messiah? Go into the whole world and preach the gospel, that whosoever would be saved. Okay? Elevating them from the material to the spiritual. Now, with this transformation, any society, individual, throughout the world, would be required to use materialism for only spiritual purposes. This is because a sanctified world operates on a completely different frequency than the material world. The verse in Zechariah 14:17 informs us that in the future, any family that refuses to go up to Jerusalem and worship God will not have any rainfall on their fields, which is telling us a sanctified world does not tolerate impurity. Okay? And that is in the millennial kingdom. We find that they will have to come up at Sukkot. Now, why would Sukkot be the time that the nations are to come up? Anybody have an answer for that? Okay, LaDonna? That is part of it. Yeshua was born during Sukkot. Brenda?
There were 70 nations.
70 nations. For the 70 nations, which the world is divided up into hundreds, okay, originally God set forth 70 nations. And Israel at Sukkot would sacrifice for the nations, okay, which is actually a blessing poured out to them, okay, at Sukkot. So that feast in particular, they're going to have to present themselves before God. And if they don't, they're in trouble. Okay? So, let's change the world. Sounds like a big task. Well, greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. Remember, Balak and Balaam wished to maintain their abominable lifestyle. Okay? They had no desire to submit to the power of spirituality. Now, Balak and Balaam knew that if the Jews had entered Israel, they could change the entire world. And that's when the war really starts, when they entered the land. And now that King Messiah Yeshua has come and given us the infilling of the Ruach HaKodesh, what is he wanting us to do? Whatever it takes to change the world. A soul that is converted from the error of his way, okay, and a sinner is saved, it's as if you saved the whole world. One soul. Okay? So the plan was to keep us and keep them in a desert, okay? According to the Midrash, the verse does not mean that Balak and Balaam wished the Jews to disappear from the face of the earth. Rather, since Balak and Balaam wished to maintain their impure lifestyles, their sole object was to prevent the Jews from entering the land of Israel. Now we can see from here that the nations of the world are willing to offer us and Israel thriving religious communities. And they do it across the globe. As long as the nations can maintain jurisdiction and the land and over the land of Israel. Things haven't changed much since the time of Balak. The Torah teaches that the plan of Balak and Balaam ultimately failed. So, too, in our day, in our age, we see Israel returning to the land. God's next step is to sanctify them, body, soul, and spirit. While the rest of the world fights to influence events in Israel, do they not? So may we all be blessed to build a home for God here on the earth. May we be able to transform the land into a heaven and a body into the soul, and to see results of the transformation on a global level. That's why we're today to set the stage for a transformation that will come on a global level. Now that was the plan, is to stop God making a home here on the earth. But you are the temple of God. And if you build that house properly, God resides in you, in every one of us, and He's not going away. Okay? So, let's turn to Balaam. What was so special about Balaam? Well, Balak sent messengers, therefore, unto Balaam the son of Beor to Pithor, which is by the river of the land of the children of his people, to call him, saying, Behold, there is a people that come out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the face of the earth, and they abide over against me. Now, so, what is he? Well, he's nothing but another priest in a man-made religion which despises truth and will not humble his worship to the Most High God. In other words, all he is another anti-Semite. Okay? The name Balaam actually means not of the people or tribe. The Mishnah gives us a unique account of Balaam. Now, it isn't the inspired word, but it is an opinion. It states, and I do not buy this because Balaam would be quite old. Some believe that it was Laban, Jacob, Israel's archenemy. Now remember, Laban was the brother to who? Huh? Rebecca. Rebecca was married to who? Huh? Was married to Jacob, the son of Abraham. Isaac. Then Isaac's children was Jacob. Okay. Abraham. Okay. So you're going back to Abraham was 175 years old. Okay. Added up, if Laban was still around, then he would have been around the life of Jacob. Then he'd be with Israel 400 years in Egypt. And then he'd be still around running his mouth off after that. So I can't buy this Laban. Okay? Now, we do know that Laban wanted to root out entirely Jacob and all of his family, and who had incited Pharaoh and Amalek against the people of Israel to bring about their destruction. It is also interesting to note the son of Beor may not have been a reference to his genealogy, but to his religious practice. There isn't any record or lineage in the Word or any other sources to the lineage of Beor. However, there is another reference to the son of Beor. It is Balak. the first king of Edom. So, was Balaam an Edomite? Of the land of Jacob's brother, Esau. I think that's more plausible. Now the text states that Balaam is living by the river Pithor in Aram, and are they brothers? It's hard to say. There is no other apparent link. So they could be linked by following the same religious practice and not be brothers. Okay, if son of Beor is a religious practice, then it certainly gives new meaning to Revelation 2:14. But I have a few things against you, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who took Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. Does that sound more like the story? And what is going to happen? I think so. Okay? So let's keep that in mind. Okay? Now, I want to point out that in the text this week, does not clearly portray Balaam as a scoundrel. That he really is. You have to look a little deeper. Here are some of the other places where you can study the depth of his hatred towards Israel. Numbers 31:8. Balaam also the son of Beor, they slew with the sword. Okay? Numbers 31:16. Okay? Through the counsel of Balaam to commit trespasses against the Lord in the land of Peor. Deuteronomy 23:5. Okay? Balaam, but the Lord thy God turned the curse into a blessing. Joshua 13:22. The soothsayers did the children of Israel slay with the sword. 2 Peter 2:10 through 15. And I'll read this one to you. But chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanliness, and despise government, presumptuously they are self-willed, they are not afraid to speak evil of dignities, whereas angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not a railing accusation against them before God. But these, as natural brute beasts made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of things they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption, and shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, as they count it pleasure to riot in the daytime. We see that going on in America? Okay? Spots they are, blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings, while they feast with you, having eyes full of adultery, and that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls, and heart they have to exercise with covetous practices, cursed children, which have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Bezor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but was rebuked for his iniquity. Now we come to the dumbass, speaking with the dumbass. Okay? The ass spoke with the man's voice, forbidding the madness of the prophet. You know, kind of makes a picture for me. I thought it was reading the headlines for the Occupy Seattle group and the Wall Street Journal for a moment. In Jude 1:11, woe unto them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the heir of Balaam for rewards. So now you can go back and look at Cain, and you get another picture of Balaam. Perished in their gainsaying, at Korah. So there's a third one. So link all those together and you'll get a better picture of this person. I would consider them a pretty nasty bunch. Perhaps a collection of the most godless men or women that we know of. Okay? And we had that problem in America. And God is working on our behalf. Okay? But we have to do our part. Pray. Humble yourself before God. Beseech Him. It is by words that we have power. Prayer. Okay? Now, why did God get angry that Balaam went? And then God tells him to go. Okay? The Lord's anger was kindled because he went. And the angel of the Lord stood in the way for an adversary against him. He was riding upon his ass, and his 2 servants were with him. Okay? So God originally told Balaam not to go. Okay? But when God allowed Balaam to go, it was Balaam's downfall. Okay? We find Balaam could hardly wait. He did seek the Lord first before he agreed to go with them, and the Lord answered him in Numbers 22:20. And God came unto Balaam at night and said unto him, If the men come to call you, rise up and go with them. But yet the words which I shall say unto you, that you shall say. Now he left every intention of earning the money that he was offered. The Lord had read his heart and knew that Balaam was pumping himself up to change the Lord's mind. Think you can do that? Don't think so. Okay? Now think about it. Have you ever done that? You know what God expects and wants, but you hope He'll change His mind. If only that you can build a good case. Remember the Bai people. Oh God, by your name did I not do all these signs and wonders and heal the sick and blah, 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 blah. God looked at them and said, Hey buddy, I never knew you. Depart from me, you worker of iniquity. So, you're not going to convince God because He knows your heart. He knows everything about you. He knows where you go. He knows what you do. You can't escape the eye of God. Okay? Now, in Numbers 22:27, when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she fell down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he smote the ass with his staff, beat the donkey. Okay? Now, what is amazing to us? Balaam reacts to talking with a donkey. Okay? Like it's an everyday happening. I mean, I can get a sense of what my dogs are happy or not happy or what they want, but I'd have to sit back in the chair if the dog says, Now, Daddy, I got a few things I'm going to talk to you about. I think I'd be a little taken back. But I do think in the world to come, we will be able to talk to the animals. So the whole story goes on in Numbers 22:28-33. And when the Lord opened the mouth of the ass, and she said unto Balaam, What have I done unto you, that thou shouldst smite me with these 3 times? And Balaam said unto the ass, Because thou hast mocked me. I would therefore there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill you. Poor donkey. Man, this guy's really enraged, didn't he? And the ass said unto Balaam, Am I not your ass? upon which thou hast ridden ever since I was thine unto this day? Was I ever wont to do so unto you? And he said, Nay. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way. The big shock comes. Okay? His sword drawn in his hand. And he bowed down his head, and he fell flat on his face. And the angel of the Lord said unto him, Wherefore hast thou smitten thee your ass these 3 times? Well, behold, I went out to withstand you, because the way is perverse before you. And the ass saw me and turned from me these 3 times. Unless she had turned from me, surely now also I had slain you and saved her alive. Now, this is really a jaw-dropping miracle. He still went forward to meet Balak. And let me tell you, we all ignore the obvious when our hearts are intently set on sin. So I want to encourage you that it's better to stop pretending. Balaam pretended he was following the Lord's instructions, but down deep inside, there lurked causeless hatred. Now, the Lord would have helped him overcome it. He made the donkey talk. He saw the angel with the sword. It still didn't change his calloused heart. Now, how much easier would it have been to heal Balaam if only he had asked? Okay? Now, how determined is a heart of sin? Pretty determined. Okay? So what does Balaam do? Balaam tries to convince God to allow him to curse Israel. He builds 21 altars, offers 21 bulls, 21 rams, 42 animals in total to impress God. What did God say about Israel's offerings? He wasn't impressed by them. Okay? We find this Numbers 23:4, 23:14, 23:29. So, you can perform all of the religious acts and duties of your own heart, offering the best that money can buy, but when we do anything with an ulterior motive, it's all for nothing. So, but when you do anything, okay, you need to do it unto God. Proverbs tells us, 24:12, if thou sayest, behold, we knew it not, doth not he that pondereth the heart consider it? And he that keeps the soul doth not know it, and shall not render to every man according to his works, your actions. Now the Lord has a plan, he has a purpose, and God is not for hire. Okay? So what moved upon Balaam to offer such tender-hearted comment? How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, and thy tabernacles, O Israel. Now the Torah tells us Balaam, a Midianite priest, with supernatural spiritual insight and power, tried to curse the children of Israel. Each time, the Lord forced him to give them a blessing. This happened 3 times. The last time was different. Balaam underwent a temporary change of heart as he stood on the hilltop overlooking the camp of the Jews. He himself was moved to give them a blessing. How good are your tents, Jacob? They are like gardens by the river, like fragrant herbs planted by the Lord. Through the years, the sages attempted to explain why Balaam was so moved by the sight of the tents of the Israelite people. Rashi thought that from the way the tents were pitched, Balaam could sense an atmosphere of modesty, privacy. From the entrance of one tent, you could not peep inside the entrance of another. Now it was clear to Balaam that with these people there was a great respect for integrity of family life and for the sanctity of privacy of the person. Now this ideal of modesty or privacy applies to both men and women. It relates to your clothes, your behavior, your speech, and what you think. So why is modesty considered so important in a believer's life? Now, a basic human perception is that if something is holy, it is also something special. And it is kept apart, reserved, and even sometimes even hidden. Now, for example, due to the holiness of the temple, one could not always go there. And certain areas were restricted only to the priest. Okay? The holiest of holies could only be entered once a year on Yom Kippur, and then only by the high priest. Now, in the synagogues today, Torah scrolls are generally kept hidden. It is kept wrapped in a mantle of silver, cased in a silver case over the ark. Unless it is actually being read in the synagogue, then it is opened. If for some reason it has to be taken from one location to another, it is usually wrapped in a talit. Now these images suggest ways in which one might respect the sanctity of the human body, created in the divine image, with the task to make the world a dwelling for God. Okay? So let's conclude with where do we find Balaam's messianic prophecies? Numbers 24:7. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. Numbers 24:8. Yehovah brought him forth out of Egypt. He shall eat up the nations. Numbers 24:17. I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not now. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. And they shall smite the corners of Moab and destroy all the children of Seth. Now as Balaam looked over Mount Peor, he saw into the children of Israel's future. He saw a mighty king of Israel brought forth, and he is our King Yeshua, who would overcome all the anti-Semites, and this is a reference to Agag, and the world that the world could produce. In verse 8, we find the prophecy of Messiah Yeshua brought out of Egypt. The fulfillment of the prophecy occurs when Joseph and Mary fled with Yeshua to Egypt in order to avoid Herod's order to kill all the young children in Bethlehem, which actually extended from one corner of Israel to the other, from the ocean to the border. This prophecy is very specific and is another requirement that Yeshua had to meet to be the Messiah. Therefore, out of this prophecy, it appears as though Balaam is in the center of it, peering back and forth, starting from the end of days, and then back to the birth of Yeshua, and then forward to the end of days again. At first glance, verse 17 reads like a riddle, but we definitely see the messianic implications of the Bethlehem star, Yeshua the conquering king. Balaam was allowed to see the coming king of Israel utterly defeating the enemies of Israel, crushing Moab, subduing Edom, and then all mankind. So why didn't he fall on his face and repent? Do you know what happened? Sin blinds you. His heart may have saw all these things, but the immediacy of what he wanted in his heart overcame his ability to fall down before the living God. Now, what was the end result of Balak? Okay? To overcome Israel. Remember, as I said before, Balak was a vassal king. He was weaker than the Ammonite kings, and he had been a witness to their defeat by the desert nation. Okay? Sihon, Og of Bashan. These were Nephilims. Now, Balak was not a Nephilim. Okay? So he was a vassal king under their authority. Now, he knew a military solution was foolish. So he sought a supernatural solution. To spiritually curse them, instead, he knew that the key to overcoming them was on a spiritual plane and not the physical one. When he did not get the occult manipulations, he was counseled to tempt them in their own demise. Okay? Instead of going to battle with Israel, he invited them to dinner. The daughters of Moab and Midian went out to the men of Israel and invited them to a banquet. Do we have another example of somebody that went out to see the land, got in trouble? Anybody know her name? Huh? Dinah. Jacob's daughter. Okay? Now, and they came to this banquet, and they told them that they were having a great sacrificial feast. Would they come and share in the festivities? They would be plenty to eat and much to enjoy. Well, you know, this chapter is not even good subject matter for adults. With the graphic imaginary of manipulation, entrapment, lust, and violence, our adversary is a lot like King Balak. He knows he is powerless and cannot harm us, so the trick is to get us to harm ourselves. And so what happens? We blame sin on the enemy. But when we give into temptation, we really do all the work ourselves. This is a common tool of the adversary. He lures a believer into fellowship with worldly people, then sparks some romantic interest with an unbeliever and a romantic entanglement. In the last chapter, there appears to be an illustration of vigilantism, but as it turns out, Phinehas has truly saved the nation with his swift action, bringing justice. Okay? Where we find 24,000 men died before the plague was stopped, probably more than what would have been lost on a battlefield. We need to be as alert and quick acting as Phinehas was in fighting the war against our own lust. 1 John 2:16 says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but it is of the world." We need to be vigilant. We have to remember the enemy cannot curse us, but our choices will bring down curses on ourselves. And that is the end result. The devil didn't make you do it. Okay? You did it because of the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, and the lust of the eye. So be careful. when the enemy brings the temptation, come feast with me. Okay? Turn and run. Because there is maybe pleasure in sin for a season, but the end thereof is what? Death. Okay? We know what's going to happen to them out there. I don't want to join them, do you? Unless they are converted. And unless you are totally connected with God, don't try and convert somebody. But we are to go into the highways and byways and compel them to come in. Because if they, and saving a soul from death. And really that's what God wants. He wants to save them, but in spite of themselves, they will go down to the pit like Balaam, like Korah, like Cain, and the generations that went down in the flood. The generations in the book of the Revelation God is going to deal with them because they will not repent. Except he is going to take a remnant. It says, in that day 10 Gentiles will cleave to the skirt of one Jew because God's with him. We are going to set that stage. And that stage is coming soon. Okay? We live in a wicked and perverse world. But God has separated us from the world. Keep your eyes, hearken to the voice of God, obey his commandments, and walk in his statutes, and you will overcome the world. Amen? And that's your Torah portion. Now, Warren he's been here a couple of times, and Warren was a contractor that was working with me and Travis on the deck at my house. But Warren emailed me. He got into 2 wrecks. Okay, the second one totaled all of his equipment, all of his truck, his trailer, it all came down. But he told me that he was experiencing hardening of his arteries. He was experiencing constriction of blood flow to his brain in his neck. The cause of that, Warren becomes very unstable and faint when he gets up. Let me read you what he texts me. Whenever he needs something healing for anybody that he knows, he calls us. He says, can you mention me to Yeshua? Honestly, Rabbi, I covet your prayers. And he said, I thank you. I'm a bit messed up now. Now the Lord is great, I said to him, and help in a time of trouble. Rabbi, I had a case of Barrett's esophagus gone now. I had a black ulcer in my stomach, gone. I had 2 bleeding pockets, open sores in the large intestine, gone. I was hooked on Oxycontin, gone. This is how our loving Father treats us when we come to him in faith. Thank you so much for interceding on my behalf. Yeshua is so good to us.